As Kaelithra's vision faded, she saw the Elder's fateful decision take form. The cell of darkness they had recklessly released began to pulse, its energy intensifying until, with a terrible roar, it engulfed the room. The Elders cried out, their forms swallowed whole by the overwhelming shadow. But Kaelithra saw one figure, the trader still young, fleeing the scene, barely escaping the onslaught. His face was pale, but his eyes were filled with cold calculation. The darkness swirled like a living entity, devouring everything in its path. Kaelithra's heart raced as she stood frozen, watching the forces that would later claim her world. But the scene shifted once again, catapulting her forward through time. Earth, years later. Kaelithra now stood in a clearing, where the trader and a young Azariel carried her, still a child, through a portal. The weight of their mission bore down on both of them, though it was clear the trader had other plans. She followed the scene as it unfolded. They stepped into a new world, Earth, and for a moment, everything seemed peaceful. But that illusion shattered as the trader pulled a small device from his cloak. Without hesitation, he pressed the button, and a pulse of energy rendered Zariel unconscious. "No!" Kaelithra gasped, but of course no sound left her lips. The trader, cold and deliberate, bent down to Zariel's unconscious form, then turned his gaze to the child Kaelithra. He whispered something inaudible before opening another portal. Kaelithra followed, compelled to see where he took her. As the portal rippled open, they stepped into a twisted, shadow-filled realm, a place Kaelithra recognized all too well. There, standing tall with dark, demonic power radiating from him, was Ultranacious Eternus, the Demon King. The very one that Gunnar had slain, the same one whose realm Gunnar was now in. The realization hit Kaelithra like a blow, a cold shiver running down her spine. This was who had controlled her, who had twisted her life from the very beginning. She watched in horror as the trader handed her over to the Demon King, the child version of her staring blankly as dark magic surrounded her. The pieces fell into place. This was how her fate had been sealed. Back at the workshop, chaos reigned. The egg, now glowing with an otherworldly light, hovered in midair. Eli and Eliana Vale worked frantically, their combined magical and technological efforts doing little to stop the egg's rapid growth. "I can't contain it!" Eli yelled over the rising hum of energy. Her equipment sparked, overloaded by the sheer power emanating from the egg. Eliana waved her hand, casting complex spells that fizzled out against the egg's radiant aura. "This is beyond us," she muttered, her voice laced with frustration. "It's connected to Kaelithra, and I fear it's reacting to her." Suddenly, Ashley's voice cut through the chaos. "The courtyard! Look!" They all turned to see the stones in the courtyard, glowing in sync with the egg. A pulse of energy seemed to pass between them, connecting the courtyard's ancient power to the egg's mysterious energy. The egg, still levitating, drifted out of the workshop, as though drawn to the courtyard's center. It grew larger, brighter, pulsating with an unknown force. "What's happening?" Eli whispered, fear creeping into her voice. Eliana's eyes darkened. "The realm's power is waking, and if we don't stop it, we may lose control over everything." As Kaelithra, no, Karina, felt the full weight of her memories crashing into her, it was as if a dam had broken inside her. She remembered Ultranacious, the Demon King, and how he had tried to bend her will, to mold her into his weapon. She remembered the horror of the missions she had been forced into, the cold-blooded assassinations, the lives she had taken under his command. And she remembered the day she had faced Gunnar, how he had bested her, and in that moment of defeat had offered her a chance at redemption. But above all, she remembered the trader's betrayal, how he had handed her over, condemned her to a life of darkness, all for his own twisted ambitions. The pressure inside her chest built to unbearable levels. Her hands clenched as waves of power surged through her body, twisting and burning in ways she had never felt before. She was going to explode. It felt like the very darkness that had once controlled her was now fighting to break free, but this time, she was the one in control. Back on Earth, the courtyard was a storm of energy. The stones beneath their feet pulsed and hummed louder and louder, the vibrations so intense that cracks began to form along the walls of the workshop. Eli, Zariel, and the rest of the team scrambled, trying to make sense of what was happening. "The stones! They're going to tear everything apart!" Ashley shouted, her voice barely audible over the deafening hum. The egg in the courtyard was no longer just glowing, it was blinding. A burning orb of light that consumed all shadows in its vicinity. It shimmered like the sun, and then, with a terrifying lurch, it began to draw in the darkness around it. The shadows in the courtyard, in the trees, even underfoot, were all sucked into the light. There were no shadows left anywhere, only pure, overwhelming light. "Get everyone out!" Zariel yelled, trying to shield his eyes. "It's going to blow!" But it was too late. With a deafening roar, the egg exploded, sending a shockwave of blinding light across the courtyard. The ground shook violently and the entire compound seemed ready to collapse. At the last moment, the starlight gem, embedded into the very heart of the workshop, absorbed the brunt of the explosion, the mystical energy wrapping around the stones and preventing their total destruction. The blinding light receded, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. As the dust began to settle, Eli, Zariel, and the others slowly lowered their arms. The courtyard was still intact, though debris littered the area. In the center, standing tall, was Karina. Her form had changed. Dark tendrils of shadow swirled around her, writhing and twisting like living entities, but they did not control her. They obeyed her. Her eyes glowed with a fierce, otherworldly power, and the air around her buzzed with the weight of her presence. "I am Queen of Nythoria," Karina declared, her voice cold and unyielding. Her gaze swept over the gathered team, and there was no mistaking the power she held now. "The traitor will pay for what he did to my world." Zariel dropped to his knee in reverence, his voice shaking as he spoke. "My queen." Eli exchanged a look with Ashley, tension crackling in the air. No one moved. The sheer intensity of Karina's power was palpable. The shadows danced at her feet, responding to her every thought, her every emotion. She was no longer the assassin who had fought beside them. She was something far greater, something unstoppable. The dark tendrils around her tightened, coiling like serpents, waiting for her command. Her body hummed with energy, her memories and powers fully returned, her rage focused on one thing: vengeance. "The traitor betrayed us all," Karina continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "And now, he will die for it." She turned, her tendrils swirling in a violent dance, her presence undeniable. Power radiated from her like the very darkness she had once been controlled by. Only now, she was the master of it. The tendrils lashed out at the air as if testing their strength, as if eager to destroy.
All right, you've made it this far. That means either you like what you're seeing, or you're lost. Either way, no harm in sticking around, right? Go on, hit that subscribe button, join the team, and while you're at it, hit like, because, let's be honest, you're already invested. And the bell? That's for you if you don't want to miss any of the action. You wouldn't want me to come find you. See you soon, and remember, once you're in, you're family.